We've entered the final week of the 2024 election, and I'm happy to finally stop talking about national politics for a second and to focus a little bit more on my home state of Montana. And for that, we are joined here today by the Democratic candidate for Lieutenant Governor of Montana, Raph Graybill. Rafe, how are you doing today? Thanks for coming on the show.
I am great. Great to be here. Great to be with another Great Falls person.
Hey, Great Falls. I have quite a few, different questions I want to talk to you about, but the first thing I want to ask you about is actually the affordability of living in Montana. I've been
Mhm.
talking to a lot of friends and a lot of people that I know in and around the state and over the last couple of weeks. And one of the central things that keeps coming back up is just how hard it is to live in this state as time goes on. Particularly
Mhm.
people talking about their jobs in this state, whether it's, people working in construction industries getting paid less than here versus other states, truckers getting paid less than here than other states, healthcare workers. There are people working at the St. Pat's Hospital right now getting paid $30,000 a year less than people over in Spokane doing the exact same job. And we don't need to get into teachers again, but we know how historically underpaid they are in this state.
Yeah.
What can we do to fix the wage problem in Montana? Because it's getting more expensive to live here, and wages are not keeping pace with the affordability of Montana.
Yeah, and I could tell you stories all day of folks we meet around the state who face this. One that pops into mind, you mentioned teachers. We were in Cardwell, Montana recently, not a huge metropolis. We did an event
Yeah.
in Cardwell because we try to go everywhere, and we met someone whose daughter is a teacher in Williston, and she wanted to come back to Montana, and if she did that, she would make $20,000 less to
Yeah.
teach in her home state of Montana, which is nuts. And like, I'm in Glendive right now. I'm going to drive through Big Timber on my way back to Helena. Another event we had in Big Timber. Big Timber was trying to hire an RN for their healthcare clinic, and they made 21 consecutive job offers to qualified applicants, every one of whom turned down the job because they couldn't afford to live in Big Timber, right? Like that's nuts. We're from Great Falls. In 2008, Great Falls was the most affordable housing market in the United States, according to the National Realtors folks. Montana as a whole now, and Ryan may have mentioned this in his interview, is the least affordable state in the country. So
Yeah.
what do? I think there's kind of two sides to this problem, and therefore two sides to the solution. One is dealing with costs, and I hope we can talk about that in a minute. But the other is wages, right? And one of the issues in Montana is the cost of living, in particular, housing has accelerated at a much faster pace than wage growth. I think there's a lot actually the government can do about wage growth. It's not all just sort of like economic external factors that come in and tell us what our future is. The government makes hundreds of choices a year about whether it will encourage the growth of good, well-paying middle-class jobs that people aspire to be in, where you make enough money to live in your community, to retire on, to send your kids to college on,
Yeah.
or the Gianforte job model of like, there will be a few rich people at the Yellowstone Club, and the rest of us will get their scraps and service them. And that's like a fundamental difference, I think, in this election. To me, I think about there was a week this summer in Montana where in the same week, this multi-generational family-run lumber business in Sealy Lake, good paying jobs, shuts down because they cite the lack of affordable housing, can't pay folks enough to live in their community. The same week, Gianforte opens up an Amazon warehouse in Missoula, and it's like, this is the future, welcome global monopolist. And I just, that's just not, I think, the future that I aspire to for my kids. Not no knock on those jobs at all. Um, a big factor in this, not the only factor, a big factor in this is supporting collective bargaining.
Yes.
Ryan and I would love to see a state of Montana where the organized labor movement doesn't just protect what it has, but it actually grows. We'd love to double the number of organized workers in Montana, folks that are covered by a collective bargaining agreement, because it turns out in America right now, workers are really valuable, but workers have their voice better heard when they're organized in a union. Unions gave us the 40-hour work week. They gave us paid time off. And, in the modern world, we should demand from especially these big global monopolists that come into Montana, we should demand things like paid family leave. We should demand things like livable wages that empower you to be in your community.
Yeah.
It matters for public sector employers, but it also matters a lot for private sector employers. And I think, when I'm not a candidate, one of the things that I do is I'm a union side labor lawyer. So I help organize labor folks negotiate contracts and try to get better wages, get a fair shake. To us, that is a huge part of the future of Montana is giving workers power. Because if workers have no power, then they're not going to earn the kind of wages to allow them to live here.
Right. Actually, let me play off that a little bit here. One of the reasons that people were getting really excited about, a Tim Walz, for instance, being the vice president candidate for the Kamala Harris ticket, was some of the things that were accomplished in Minnesota during his time as governor. Two of those items were, in fact, paid family leave and paid sick leave. That's something that does not exist in Montana right now. Would that be something that your administration would be interested in bringing to the state of Montana if you were in fact elected?
I mean, I can tell you as a father of three young kids, I am very interested in that happening in Montana.
Yeah.
I've got my kids they're 5, 3.5, and 18 months. And, my wife and I both work, and it's a huge toll on the family when you don't have paid leave. You have to kind of basically hoard your sick days. My wife had a lot of sick days. You have FMLA, but ultimately for each of our kids, our family took unpaid leaves of absence from work and in my wife's job, and I took shorter leave than I would like to have taken with my kids. And I think having exploring options like paid family leave, to me, that's like the true. There's a lot of talk about the pro family agenda. That's the pro family agenda, is like empower people to be able to have good jobs they can return to, but like have the right supports for their family when we need it. That's super important to me personally.
Okay. Well, kind of going off the affordability thing, I asked Ryan about this, your running mate for governor, and I kind of just want to come back to it one more time because I think it's just such a crucial topic, especially for, I mean, not just people across the state, but particularly where I'm living at in Missoula and Bozeman, these college towns. The housing affordability crisis is just crushing people. It's absolutely crushing people. And it feels like folks who are in their 30s are kind of almost laughing at the idea of ever being a homeowner in this state
Yeah.
because it just feels so out of reach in places where the average cost of a house is 500, 600, 700, $800,000. Who has that kind of money in these areas where, unless you're, in the tech industry or in finance, maybe? I mean, other than that, everyone else is kind of just like scraping to get by. What can you do to make home ownership, what used to be just basically just a staple of the middle class, now seems to be getting out of reach? What can you do to make it seem like home affordability or becoming a homeowner can be an option for people again? It could be a realistic expectation again.
Yeah. I mean, some of this is national factors, like sort of general housing prices, interest rates, but some of it is localized and is within sort of the control of government where we can make
Yeah.
policy choices. I really think of it, there's kind of short-term fixes, long-term fixes. So the long-term fixes that are kind of sexy or more exciting and fun to talk about are what we talked about: wage growth, making sure that wage growth keeps up with housing costs. That's really important,
Yeah.
and we kind of covered that. We need to build more housing in Montana. That's really important.
But how
We have a
much
lot.
more though?
Oh, like math, like much more.
Yeah.
Much more. I mean, we had a tremendous amount of influx of population in the last 4 or 5 years in Montana, and we
Yeah.
didn't build enough homes to keep up with that. I mean, we were already short on housing stock before that. We have a lot of houses to build, but I mean, and those are long-term things. We should invest in those areas. We should talk about those, and the government has a big role to play. In the short term, there are actually things that I think can take pressure immediately off of, in particular, renters, but also homeowners. I'm
Yeah.
sure Ryan mentioned this, but this property tax increase that the government put through the last year under Gianforte. For those that don't know, there was a massive government surplus, $2.6 billion. There was no need to raise taxes, but Gianforte raised property taxes anyway. The average
Mm.
increase across the state was 21%. But in places like Missoula, like Bozeman, Western Montana, much, much more. We've seen homes go up by as much as 111%. And if you are a renter, it hits you even harder because your landlord has to pay the increased property taxes, but there's no rebate for you. Some homeowners got a rebate. It usually didn't cover the amount of the increase, and there was all sorts of problems with that. But if you're a renter, you got none of that. So we met
Right.
a guy not long ago in it was in Billings who is a landlord, and he was talking about how he hates that he has to go to his tenants and say, I'm increasing your rent $200 a month, and it's entirely because of this property tax increase. Now, if that increase in property taxes had gone to fund schools or invest in early childhood education or invest in better infrastructure, that might be one thing. But it didn't. They went to a state general fund surplus that was then redistributed to millionaires and billionaires like the governor and to the largest corporations in the state. Northwestern Energy, who you probably pay a bill to, got a
Yep.
$36 million tax cut they didn't even ask for. Didn't even
Right.
ask for it. They got the $36 million back. So that's an area where, when I first sort of learned about this topic, I thought, oh yeah, property taxes, that's maybe not, that's important, but maybe it's not really a huge role. No, that has an immediate effect, like multiple hundreds of dollars per month effect on renters, particularly in Montana's western cities, like Missoula, like Bozeman, Whitefish, Helena. It's a big deal. And what's to me is like criminal about it is they had a surplus. They didn't have to
Yeah.
raise anybody's taxes. And Ryan's plan is none of these rebates, none of this, we'll take your money and you can apply for a fraction of it back. That doesn't work. Just don't take the money in the first place. Keep taxes constant to their 2022 level. That would be less than 1/10 of the entire surplus, so we can afford it. That's always the follow-up. How do you afford it? Well, we have this big surplus. We can
Yeah.
afford to do that. And it's led to this sort of crazy, I mean, not crazy, but unexpected political situation where, our top two issues as we travel the state are we need to lower property taxes and address affordability. And we need to keep the government out of people's private healthcare decisions, and in particular, the right to abortion. And, it was early on when I had joined the ticket, Ryan and I kind of looked at each other and went, we're the low tax, pro freedom, pro family ticket. Couple of Democrats running around the state trying to lower taxes and keep the government out of people's private lives. But that's where we are in Montana right now. And I think, we can talk about this, but I think a lot of folks voted for Gianforte in 2020 and thought, oh, he'll be a moderate Chamber of Commerce Republican. It'll be okay. And what did they get? They got the biggest tax increase in the history of Montana, which is crazy. They didn't have to do it. And they get the government in your doctor's office. And I think, we meet people all the time who are Republicans who voted from before and said, gosh, I voted from the first time, but I did not vote for this.
Mm. I've been wondering how you were going to reach a lot, because I feel like politics in general has become really nationalized. There's a
Oh yeah.
lot of just like straight ticket voting anymore. And as this state has trended more to the Republican Party, a Democrat winning statewide has felt less and less in reach, or at least it seems that way to maybe someone who's not quite as involved in the day-to-day grind of a campaign. You've been traveling all over the state, though. How have you been reaching some of these Republican voters and convincing them that, if, well, hey, maybe they're voting for Trump at the top of the ticket, but how do you convince them to vote for the Busse-Graybill ticket at the governor's slot?
Yeah, and you're onto something there. I mean, I think national politics has crept in more, and that's a challenge. But there is nothing more old school Montana than voting for person over party. There are a lot of folks in the state who want to be ticket splitters, and we're a Big Ten campaign. We welcome folks who are, I don't care if you're voting for Trump or Harris or someone else. I mean, that's national politics. Ryan and I are the first folks to tell you that I think national politics is deeply broken in this country and is not
Yeah.
serving us very well. But we also are humble. We can't change national politics. We can change state politics. And so, really it's focusing on issues that are not like, they're not going to get us interviews on Fox News or on MSNBC, but they're issues that matter to this community. So affordability, like clearly first and foremost, investing in quality public education, which is a long-term investment for our kids. For me, it's an immediate thing because I got kids in public school. Getting rid of this commercialization of our wildlife and our wild places. That's something that I think is important. And none of those are like partisan issues. I just finished an event in Glendive,
Yeah.
mixed audience of Democrats and Republicans. But when we talk about, for example, this issue of the government raising your taxes when they didn't have to, everybody nods, everybody agrees. When we talk about you need to invest in our kids through public education, Republicans all over the state agree with that. And so, I think you've seen our opponent talk about honestly, a lot of national issues that the governor of Montana doesn't have a ton of influence over because his campaign is driven by division, driven by national politics. And I'm just so much happier to wake up in the morning as part of a campaign where what I have to do is find things in common with people and find the values that we share rather than find wedges that divide us. And that's joyful work. And having gone all over the state for the past, since February, and Ryan's been in it for a year and a month, I can speak for both of us. We have never been more optimistic that those shared values are out there. We just have to reach folks. You have to kind of peel away the national political cloud and all the ads and all the stuff that's happened this year and say, hey, you and I actually agree on a lot. And let's put our swords down, put our labels down, and maybe we can do something here.
Speaking about things that affect all of us, there is always the ever present problem that we have every summer, which is like smoke in the air,
Yeah.
fire season. I kind of want to talk about climate change a little bit here because I know this is something that I think it's marred in too much controversy, especially in a place like Montana. I I know that there are plenty of factors that are outside of our control that we have that nothing that we can do about. I mean, there's fires raging in Canada and California that they make their way over here. But as far as what's happening here in Montana, what can be done to kind of lessen the impacts of the fire season? Do we need to get more firefighters out there? And maybe on the job side of it, is there a way to maybe to bring some new green energy jobs into the state of Montana? Because I think when people have this conversation, especially over in eastern Montana, people are worried about losing their energy jobs that they rely on. Is there a way to bring some green energy jobs into Montana? Hemp production, maybe? Like, what are your thoughts on all this?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think, I mean, so first, climate change is real. We're not afraid to say that. Some folks are afraid to say that. It's a real thing. You
Yeah.
can't deny it. I remember, being a kid in Montana and, the smoky season was like maybe a week or so in September. And, now we have wildfire smoke well into October. I remember 2017, like basically, that was the year that,
The
my wife moved to
apocalypse.
Montana. You couldn't see, like, I remember she was sort of like, oh yeah, I forgot there were mountains around Helena, because we couldn't see them for a whole month,
Yeah.
just thick fog, couldn't go outside. So it's real. And I think your question sort of suggests the answer, which is the right one, which is there is a lot we can do to be leaders in a transition to clean energy. I mean, we still need baseload power. Our legacy power sources are not going to go away overnight. They should not go away overnight, but we have a huge opportunity here in Montana to lead with clean energy jobs. And we've got like, I'm in eastern Montana. We're going to drive past Colstrip on our way back. Colstrip is a great example of where you've got an incredibly skilled workforce. You've got access to high quality power lines. Like, why couldn't that be a place where we innovate on clean energy jobs? Like, Ryan has talked about. There's a lot of experimentation now on small scale nuclear, which has no CO2 emissions.
Okay.
Wyoming is leading on that. Why should we not be leading on it? Why are we getting beaten by Wyoming? Like, there's a lot of ideas, geothermal, you mentioned hemp production. I mean, there's a whole bunch of ideas. And I think that if our climate policy is just put our head in the sand and pretend like nothing's happening, like that's not responsible to our kids. And it's just like dumb business. It's really dumb business when we could be out there being leaders. Montana's been leader in energy and extractive industries forever. I mean, that's a huge part of Montana, and we should lead be on the cutting edge of innovation. I mean, sort of like we talked about organized labor, we should not be just sort of like protecting what we have. We should be building on what we have and doing more. And I don't see any of that from Gianforte. And, we meet folks all over the state when we campaign who want to do this. And we're like, let's go. We want to be cheerleaders for you.
Okay. So I know we're getting kind of towards the end of our conversation here. So I have a bunch of like quicker questions for you. So if you
Sure.
want to just answer them a little more rapid fire style, would your administration ban TikTok?
Would it ban? No, I don't. I mean, I don't think you can ban TikTok. I mean, I don't personally have a
Yeah.
TikTok account. I'm a bit of a Luddite, but
Well,
I
the
think there's a
Gianforte
lawsuit on
administration
this right
tried
now.
to
That's
ban TikTok. So,
Yeah, I mean, there's a lawsuit on this, and I think now I should be careful because I'm not in this case. I don't know the exact details, but I mean, I seem to remember like the attorney general kind of walked into the hearing on this bill to ban TikTok and was basically like, I don't think this is a constitutional bill, but let's do it anyway. And I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, hold on a second. I think for apps and things like that, I mean, you vote with your feet. I guess I'm voting with my feet by not having it. But if
yeah.
someone else wants it, like, go ahead.
It was quite the scandal there when it was first happening, about a year or so ago when people were talking about banning TikTok. We heard it, rumblings in the federal government, made its way through several different states, made its way here to Montana. So just had to ask that question. I know a lot of people were kind of worried about that, especially people who make a living off of TikTok as becoming more
Mhm.
and more prevalent. Speaking about tech questions, though, we are seeing a rise in artificial intelligence. We are seeing that plenty of people around the country are talking about how more and more people need protections from artificial intelligence. Would the state of Montana under your administration provide protections for the residents of Montana from AI?
I think that's a good idea. Sorry, there's a very loud fan going in my room. Hopefully it's not too
Can't even
loud for
hear it.
you. Oh, great. I think that's a great idea. I don't have at my fingertips exactly what the best architecture is to do that, but like everyone else, I'm very aware of AI's encroachment in society, and I think that we should absolutely, as a government, be leading when it comes to figuring out what is the best architecture to protect rights, protect industries, while also like harnessing the innovation from AI. Um, it- I promise I give a short answer, but it just occurs to me, we got a memo leaked to us from the Gianforte administration where they sent
Oh,
out an email to agencies where one of the questions they said, like, we need you to answer these questions for Governor Gianforte. And one of them was, how can we use AI in government? And, like, this was the healthcare agency. I was like, I don't want AI making my healthcare decisions. That seems bad. So, I mean, that's a big issue coming down the pike for everybody.
yeah.
And like climate change, we should not just be like, head in the sand. I think we should be leaders on it.
Okay, perfect. There are questions, around the country right now whether or not states should be investing into high-speed rail. I have seen that there were ideas about bringing something like that to the state of Montana. Would you be interested in investing in high-speed rail if your administration, well, if you were to win the governor's race?
That's a good question. I think there is a working group in Montana studying resurrecting a passenger corridor between I think we go basically I-90, but then go up to Helena or go through Butte and then go up to the western part of Montana.
Mhm.
I don't know if that'd be high speed or not. I know high speed rail is like a significant infrastructure investment, and I
Yeah.
want to make sure kind of our bases are covered before we invested in something totally new. But like finding folks more ways to efficiently get around Montana is great. And I would be very interested in hearing, learning more about that and hearing what the arguments are for and against it. I did see Helena, where I live in Helena now, like did not want to be part of the passenger rail study. And I don't know if I agree with that so much.
Yeah.
But yeah, increasing modes. I mean, when we were younger, in Montana, you could take those small subsidized air flights. Remember those? Big Sky Air. You could like
Yeah.
fly to Billings for the day and back. Um, and it's a little weird to me that as Montana has matured, we have fewer methods of getting around our state. And I'm about to drive from Glendive to Helena. It's a very big state. So if I could be in a rail car, it might be kind of nice.
It would probably make things a lot faster, that's for sure.
Yeah, or at
Uh,
least I could relax a little bit, not just be on the wheel.
in the car all the time. So one of the other things that I was mentioning, the governor of Minnesota before, Governor Tim Walz, who's now on the Democratic ticket. Another thing that was popularized, I think, in the national discussion after he entered the race was the fact that his state had supported free school breakfast and lunch for all kids in Minnesota. Would that be something that you'd be interested in bringing to the state of Montana?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the financial details of that, so I have to look at it. But like as a policy thing, that sounds great. That sounds awesome. And when I mentioned Montana had this $2.6 billion surplus, the
Yeah.
kind of thing I'd like to spend that on is helping kids eat in the morning. That's a much better
Yeah.
idea than giving it to Northwestern Energy when they didn't even ask for it. Like, what would 36 million bucks do in terms of free and reduced breakfast and lunch at school? That would be a tremendous thing. I think that sounds like a great
Absolutely.
idea.
Okay. And one of the last of our quick questions here. A lot of folks are kind of worried about, and especially in the trans community, about gender affirming care. And I
Yeah.
think I had some people reach out to me and specifically wanted to know like what your stance would be on that and whether or not you would protect gender affirming care for folks in Montana.
Yeah, I think these laws that have been passed by the government to try to get involved in private and personal healthcare decisions are ridiculous oversteps. And I think there's a reason the courts have largely found them to be unconstitutional. In Montana, we have a right to what's called bodily autonomy, which means you have the freedom over your own body. And as Ryan often says this in events, if you don't have freedom over your own body, how can you ever really be free? And so to have a bunch of legislators come in and try to say, we're going to tell you how your healthcare will be provided. We're going to tell your doctors what to say to you. I mean, that's never been the Montana way. I think it's unconstitutional. And I think you'd see it in a Busse-Graybill administration, much more assertive leadership out of the governor's office. We're not going to sign crazy laws like that. Absolutely not. We're going to veto them.
Okay. So very last question I have here for you, something I also asked your running mate, but I think it's again important question worth asking. There's a lot of people who are apathetic about this election. I talked to a
Yep.
lot of people online, a lot of people in my life about this election. Some people have been considering sitting out of the vote. Some people are wondering, like when are things ever going to actually get better? And to those voters, people who are still sitting on the fence, not knowing if they're going to vote in this election or not, what is your message to them about why they should participate in this election?
Yeah, absolutely. Two reasons. So, or really kind of the same reason. In federal politics, when one party wins the presidency, it's very hard for it to deliver on its program, right? There's lawsuits, there's Congress, but in state government, it's totally different. In state government, when you have a change in the governor's office, there are immediate effects on policy, and like you get what you pay for, right? And so Gianforte comes in 2020. Gianforte comes in and immediately attacks women's rights, attacks abortion rights, attacks the rights of people who are not just, cis white men. He goes after affordability. I mean, there's a dramatic change in how and what it means to be a Montanan in the past 4 years, because the governor has a tremendous effect on your daily life in a way that the presidential race is a little more diffuse. The other thing, this is kind of flip side of that coin, is elections in Montana can be incredibly close. John Tester in 2006 ran against a longtime Republican incumbent. Everyone said, oh, you can never beat an incumbent. You can't do it. Tester wins by 3,000 votes. Like every single vote counted in that race. Our race is going to be the same way. People say, oh, you can't beat a Republican incumbent. No, you can. You absolutely can. But people have to vote. So I hope people vote up and down the ballot. I think that's really important. But like for your daily life, for your community, there is nothing more consequential than the governor's race. It matters for literally how you can exercise your freedom in the state. It matters for affordability in your pocketbook. And you see the effects. Gianforte's Montana is fundamentally different than Steve Bullock's Montana, and we are trying to change that. And if we don't stop him after 4 years, all the wish list stuff for him gets done. Stream access law goes away. Unions are crippled by right to work. The assault on our privacy and freedoms is accelerated. It is so important that folks vote in the governor's race, and it can be hard and dispiriting. And again, I'm in politics, and I'm so sick of some of the stuff that's going on. But this race, there could not be a clearer choice that affects your day-to-day freedom and your wallet.
Okay. Raph Graybill, the Democratic candidate for Lieutenant Governor here in Montana in 2024. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. For folks who are interested about you and your campaign, where can they check you out online?
Follow us online. You can look me up, Raph Graybill, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And then Ryan D. Busse, which is TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Also, bussefrommontana.com is our website, and you can email us info@bussefrommontana.com, and we actually check that. That's a real email account. A real person will get that to me or to Ryan. So reach out. We want to be accessible. We want to earn your vote, and appreciate you having us on.
All right, everyone. We'll have some links for you in the episode description, so go ahead and check those out now, and you will see those links. Thank you to our candidate for coming on to the show. Thank you for everyone for watching this episode, and we will see you in the next one. Thank you for watching this video of Independent Thought. If you liked the conversation, please go ahead and give the video itself a like, and be sure to subscribe for future episodes on the channel.